George Galloway, and the mother of all talk shows. Welcome to the Open University of the Airwaves with George Galloway.
The human rectum that is Benjamin Netanyahu has cancer in the 3rd degree. His prostate is being taken out as we speak. Personally, I pray for his speedy recovery so that he can appear in the dock at the Hague and spend the rest of a miserable, prostate-free life in a cell, preferably with some other war criminals. Speaking of which, a new poll out today says that Labour, if a general election were held tomorrow, would be out. They would lose their parliamentary majority, and 200 Labour MPs would be dumped unceremoniously outside the House of Commons before anyone even realised that they were there. They're off and running in the German general election. That's going to be the most important poll of 2025. And the head of the Adwan Hospital in the Gaza Strip, a man distinguished as a surgeon, as a pediatrician, known throughout the medical fraternity of the world, is said by the Israeli people who have captured him and thrown him in a dungeon to be a key operative of Hamas. Worse than that, every Western outlet in the world has repeated those words, knowing that they are a fantastic lie. I'm in fighting form. I don't know about you, but I'd suggest you fasten your seatbelts. It's going to be a bumpy night on the mother of all talk shows.
Curious about our curriculum? Have something to say? Then call us now to join the debate on the mother of all talk shows. The only education you can get for free. George Galloway, the mother of all talk shows. With George Galloway, the world is our classroom, and you're welcome to sit in and join the seminar.
Dr. Kamaladwanhospital is a medical paragon of virtue and grace who refused to leave the Kamaladwanhospital in Gaza when Israel leveled their tanks and their guns at the hospital, despite the fact that Israel had already murdered his son, that Israel had already wounded him. He refused to leave his patients and his staff, dozens of whom have now perished, and the good doctor has been taken away into an Israeli dungeon where previously another high-ranking medical practitioner in Gaza was raped to death. Let me say those words again, raped to death. If that doesn't get your blood running faster, I don't know what would, other than the shameless, shameful, unforgivable, unpardonable repetition of the Israeli lie that this gifted and dedicated doctor is in fact a key operative of Hamas, repeated ad nauseum all day on every Western news outlet. It is utterly revolting that the so-called journalistic profession, broadcasters, writers everywhere have been silent about the massacre of hundreds of their fellow journalists in the course of 15 months and are still ready to repeat these foul Goebbelian lies. You remember when the first hospital in Gaza was attacked by Israel and set on fire. Anyone who claimed so was committing a blood libel against the Jewish people. A blood libel, they called it. And the entire Western media ran away from the story and began instead to regurgitate the foul lie that the strike on that hospital had been a misfiring Hamas rocket. You don't believe me? Look it up. Look back. It was only 15 months ago, for God's sake. Israel has now destroyed and releases footage of it destroying 18 out of the 20 hospitals in the Gaza Strip, and the remaining 2 are no longer functional. Such has been the level of destruction that they have suffered. Nurses and doctors in their legions have been killed, wounded, and thrown into dungeons where, as I said, at least one of them, an eminent, globally recognized surgeon, was raped to death. That's why I received the news of the human rectum that is Benjamin Netanyahu's 3rd stage prostate cancer this very evening with a kind of meh. I would prefer him to survive it. I want to see him on trial like Eichmann, like the butcher, torturer, mass murderer, Eichmann. That's where I would like to see Netanyahu. But he can't be looking forward to the judgment day if the surgeon's knife were to slip this evening, if the antibiotics were not to work this evening. He cannot be looking forward to the hellfires to which he is surely destined. The massacres in Gaza continue, even although the entire north of Gaza has been ethnically cleansed. 76% of all buildings in Gaza have been destroyed. 93% of all people in Gaza are now homeless. There is no clean water. There are no medical facilities extant. There is no decent food. The people are suffering from malnutrition at best and starvation at worst. And nobody gives a toss about it. No politician talks about it, except when they have to give it their undying support. That's the fundamental sickness in the Western world. And there are some who originate, ethnically speaking, in the Eastern world, but live in the Western world, who don't want unity around this question, who don't want to unify the largest number of people possible, irrespective of their religious predilections, their religion, they're part of a religion, they're part of a schism in a religion. They're not ready. In fact, they have declared the end of what they called the marriage of convenience in defense of the people of Gaza. To hell with them, I say. The people of Gaza are still bleeding. The people of Gaza are still starving, still dying of thirst and want. And until and unless there are no Palestinians left in the world, Palestine will still be the heart of the matter for us. And we will still seek to unite everyone that we can in defense of those Palestinian people. You see, for some people, Palestine was not the main question. They only pretended that it was. But for us, it remains the number one foreign policy question in the world, the moral center of the world. And we will not relinquish it, despite the siren voices seeking to lure onto the rocks of separatism, extremism, fanaticism, and danger those who have been with us in their millions in this country all this time. We will not relinquish it. We will never leave the Palestinian people alone, even if others do. I mentioned that latter point because the head of ISIS and Al-Qaeda, who is now the new dictator of Syria, has just announced it will be 4 years until the people of Syria are allowed an election to pick a president. It's normal, yeah? It's normal that you fight for democracy and against dictatorship, and immediately, on the force of arms given to you by Western countries, I just saw, by the way, a picture of an ISIS fighter in Syria, in Damascus, wearing not only the ISIS patch, but carrying a rare and brand new Belgian submachine gun. Of course, someone else probably paid for it, likely Saudi Arabia, which was thanked by name by the dictator of Syria, al-Jolani, this very day, who thanked Saudi Arabia for everything that they had done to give birth to the new Syria. The new Syria in which they're fleeing, shouted the exultant crowd as the Christian population of Malula, the holiest place in Christendom, in my opinion, the holiest place I have ever been, where Mother Agnes, her times, and her nuns, and the priests and the clergy, and the remaining Christians who speak Aramaic, the language of Jesus, are being ethnically cleansed from the grottos, from the cliff-top churches and monasteries and nunneries. They're fleeing. Shout the exultant fanatics who are driving them out for fear of the kind of massacre they already suffered at the hands of exactly the same people in 2013. The mess that is Syria is the worst thing that we have ever done. We've done some very, very bad things. It is the worst thing. It's worse than Iraq. It is the worst thing because we have visited upon a now helpless population, disarmed, its weaponry destroyed, its territory occupied by Israel, by Turkey, and by the United States of America. But the central part of Syria is now ruled by the people who not 10 years ago were cutting out their hearts and eating them live on camera because they were of a different faction, a different religion, a different denomination. It is truly unspeakable that these men in suits in Washington and London, Paris and Berlin, it is truly unspeakable that they have visited this terror on the people of that region. Now they hope, like Dr. Frankenstein hoped, that having made this monster, it will remain under their tutelage and control. Well, it probably will. In relation to Israel, they've made clear as day, that the days when Syria would base the Palestinian resistance are over. The days when Syria would be a transmission belt for the wherewithal of the resistance in Lebanon and in the West Bank and Gaza could defend themselves against their occupier are over. But of course, these Uzbeks and Chechens and Uyghurs and Albanians and Frenchmen and Welshmen and Turcomen and all the alphabet soup that is the HTS, the Al-Qaeda offshoot, will soon be bored murdering Christians and beheading Alawites. Apart from anything else, the day will come when there are no Christians left in Syria, just like what happened in Iraq next door. They will soon be looking for other places to go. Have gun, will travel. Better hope they're not traveling anywhere near you, armed to the teeth, red in tooth and claw with other people's innocent blood. Better hope they're not headed towards you. There are so many other things going on in the world. The collapse of the British government in the affections such as they were for the Labour Prime Minister Keir Starmer have created in just 6 months a political crisis in the ranks of the governing party. For having been a member of Parliament myself for almost 40 years, let me tell you, there is nothing more important to the vast majority of members of Parliament than that they should continue to be members of Parliament. It's a clean job, no heavy lifting, good wages, carpets are thick, upholstery soft. People call you sir. People in uniform call you sir. They don't want to leave it. They don't want to lose it. But today's opinion poll shows that 200 Labour members of Parliament, if there was an election tomorrow, would be dumped on the steps of Westminster before anyone other than those who benefited from their fat salary and expenses checks even knew that they were there. Nothing concentrates the mind more powerfully than the knowledge that one is to be hanged in the morning, said Dr. Johnson. Well, these MPs, looking at that opinion poll, know who they are. So my prediction to you is that before 2025 is out, the Labour Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, will discover that it was all too much for him and that for the sake of his mental health and his future earnings on the Tony Blair gravy train, that it's time to hand over, not to a lean and hungry man, for Wes Streeting is neither lean nor hungry, but he is darkly ambitious, and he's already on maneuvers. Lastly, Joe Biden is still at least sentient enough to give an interview. We presume he gave it and that it was not ghosted, in which he said he regrets having withdrawn from the presidential race and believes that had he stayed in, he would have beaten Donald Trump again, beaten him like a toy drum, as he's fond of saying. But the truth is that the Democrats cooked their goose when they rigged their rules to shoehorn a dementia patient into the saddle for one more battle as their candidate for president 2024. And when the lies and deceit about his mental collapse became undeniable to their major donors and to, crucially, those that still run the Democratic Party, the Clinton and Obama families, when it could no longer be denied, they replaced the idiot with the fool that was Kamala Harris. They remain deep in denial, and we'll be talking about Egypt later in the show also. Stay tuned. It's the mother of all talk shows.
The 1897 edition of War of the Worlds by H.G. Wells. Read by George Galloway. Available only on Patreon.
The cylinder was artificial, hollow, with an end that screwed out. Something within the cylinder was unscrewing the top. Good heavens, said Ogilvy. There's a man in it, men in it, half roasted to death, trying to escape. At once, with a quick mental leap, he linked the thing with the flash on Mars. The thought of the confined creature was so dreadful to him that he forgot the heat and went forward to the cylinder to help turn. But luckily, the dull radiation arrested him before he could burn his hands on the still glowing metal.
You are listening to the mother of all talk shows with George Galloway.
Well, there's a poll running fast. Will 2025 be better or worse than 2024? You can vote better or worse on my Telegram channel, t.me/George Galloway, on my X, my Twitter, on the YouTube community poll, or on the YouTube stream. If you're watching on the YouTube stream, stand by for further announcements. But meanwhile, tell as many of your friends and followers as possible that this show is currently broadcasting. If you want to call the show, it's toll free on +1 844 944 3344. That's in the US and Canada. +1 844 944 3344. It's free of charge in the United Kingdom and Ireland. 0808 196 5522. 0808 196 5522. And the worldwide number is 0044 203 966 2625. Get hitting the phones now. Our good friend Anya Parampil, journalist, political commentator, and author of Corporate Coup, Venezuela and the End of U.S. Empire, joins us now and is always welcome. Anya, compliments of the season to you and your lovely family. Let me ask you about a less lovely family first. Biden's in denial, still thinks he could have done it. Do you think he's right?
It's funny that you remind me even that Biden is still president, because in many ways we've moved on in the United States. Even the political debates in Congress recently over the budget were mainly driven by Trump and his surrogates in Washington. It's almost as if Biden is out of the picture. And of course, he was in a very mysterious way forced out of the picture earlier this year when he announced he was not going to run for president in that mysterious letter that was just posted to his Twitter while he was MIA. So I still have questions about whether or not Biden himself actually consciously dropped out of the race and turned it over to Kamala the way he did. Could he have beat Donald Trump? I think at this point, most people would agree anybody could have done better than Kamala. But he did it once before. I think at that point, though, the media had already turned on on Biden. And even though people like me were aware of his mental decline, even before he won the last election, the media suddenly decided to pay attention to it and start discussing it and making it an issue, the mainstream media. And so I think in that way, Biden was done. And it wasn't his choice. And it was a very carefully orchestrated media and Democratic Party controlled event.
He's no longer talked about or thought about, but he's still spending your money and he's still got his finger on your triggers. He is shipping out as much as he possibly can of your country's money to Zelensky in the Ukraine and to Netanyahu in Israel. And there seem to be no brakes that can be applied. Even though he's, in the case of the Ukraine, he's clearly acting in a partisan manner in defiance of the wishes of the incoming president, who made an election issue out of ending the war in Ukraine, not throwing further fuel onto it.
Yes, it is a last-minute push, it seems, from his administration, kind of a Hail Mary to do as much damage and cause as much death, particularly in Ukraine, as possible before Trump comes in. I don't think there's the same fear that Trump will rein in Netanyahu or the Israelis in the Middle East as there is an assumption that his administration will negotiate or allow for Ukraine and Russia to negotiate an end to this war, because the goal in Ukraine has been achieved. The country is destroyed. BlackRock and Co. can step in and rebuild. USAID and the US government can roll out even more of their technologies that they've attempted so far, like the digital ID that they've put in Ukraine. They can use it as a testing ground for their technology and education and other areas that they've said, so they can use Ukraine already. They've destroyed it. There's no one. I mean, hopefully one day we'll get the numbers of the people who actually died and who will be living in Ukraine. I mean, it's just heartbreaking to me that those are even questions that we have. But the goal of also weakening Russia to the point that it was not able to support its ally Syria in the Middle East was also achieved. I think these wars are directly linked in that way, because Ukrainian intelligence even participated, sending drones to help the terrorists on the march in Syria over recent weeks. And I do think that Trump, while he's told Netanyahu that he would like that war and the war in the Middle East to be wrapped up by the time he takes an office, that ultimately he himself won't have that much leverage over the Israelis, and that it's unfortunately, I think, only going to be more money and weapons headed to that region, even once Trump comes into office. So I would hope that his base remains aware of this, and that the slogan "America First" can stay alive under Trump and can start to target the influence of Israel even within his administration.
On that subject, I've been following, without really understanding too much about it, a fierce debate that has broken out in the Trump ranks between Steve Bannon on the one hand, a keeper of the true flame, of the original MAGA idea, and Elon Musk and Vivek, his running mate, his co-pilot in the new Dodge. It seems to center on the issuing of high-tech visas to people from India in particular, but from around the world, that can bypass the normal immigration delays and waits. And Bannon is arguing, we came to power, or are coming to power, to put America first, to give these jobs to Americans, not to import more and more Viveks, more and more Elons. Is this dichotomy likely to run, and where will Trump come down on it?
The big question is where Trump will come down on it. I think that Steve Bannon, on an objective level, when it comes to the America First slogan and ideology and what Trump's base actually represents, is correct. That people did not vote for Trump for him to turn around and then grant. The debate is about whether or not there should be a limit or a cap on these H-1B visas. Not that they shouldn't happen at all, but that they should just be unlimited. And definitely, I think the MAGA movement, when it comes to the people on the ground and not necessarily on TV or running Doge, they didn't expect for Trump to make a decision that would lead to any sort of unlimited migration or immigration. They would say that countries are not sports teams. Countries are nations that have shared values and identities, and it's not just, we shouldn't see ourselves as a team that it needs to get ahead in the realm of what they're specifically talking about is AI and that kind of technology centered around Silicon Valley. And there are American workers that are capable of taking those jobs, but they will definitely require higher pay and benefits than what some of these workers that come from mainly India would expect. And I've seen interesting reporting in recent days from, there was a post from Ashley St. Clair, who is usually pretty vocally in support of Elon Musk and whatever he has to say, but she actually was reporting based on conversations she had with lawyers in the Silicon Valley area who are telling her how these programs work is there are these third-party kind of employment hub groups that bring in people from overseas, place them 10 people in an apartment, and they're not living in very great conditions. They even forge sometimes their resumes and their skill level in order to get these jobs that have a high sticker price technically on the salary, but that doesn't actually end up going into the pockets of these workers. These workers then have no ability to fight for their rights or demand pay. And so it's actually a way of destroying workers' conditions in the United States. The people that come here aren't going to be treated very well. And there is an issue. There is an issue in Silicon Valley in particular. Mainstream media have reported it even of some of the influential Indians that have come here and are from, take their Hindu caste very seriously, actually implementing caste discrimination policies within the Silicon Valley network. That people come here and are, the workers are part of a lower class caste, put into separate eating lunchrooms, and they're discriminated against for housing. They won't be rented to by the higher caste Indians. They won't be allowed promotions, and it's actually something that is a growing issue. There are even laws and protests in California about this. They passed an anti-caste discrimination bill in Congress, in the state legislature, and the governor, Gavin Newsom, vetoed it after one of his main donors, a high caste Indian Brahmin, told him to. And so this is what we're dealing with in the United States when you talk about also bringing in a large group of people that are, used to living differently.
Wow. That's a Pandora's box. It's the first misstep, in a way, that Musk has taken, isn't it? At least so far as his new friends in the MAGA movement are concerned. When I heard Bannon talk about him, it was characteristically, Bannon's a tough guy, it was savage. He was talking about Elon Musk in a savage way. I wonder how deep this fissure will go. Any idea on that?
Well, when it comes to what I've seen on X, this platform that I will give Musk credit for, I think, improving. I don't think it is amazing to watch these debates play out within a political party in real time, and to see his base, the Trump base, turn on Elon so rapidly. And then his response has been to unverify and remove the blue check marks from some very high profile accounts in MAGA, including like Laura Loomer, who I'm not a huge fan of hers, but she's a very popular and prolific poster. And he took away her badge, her verified badge, after she disagreed with him and kind of sparked this debate. So that's disturbing to me, because that can definitely be turned against any of us at any time now. When Elon's strength was supposed to be that he was not into censorship and denying voices of people that were opposed to people in power. And now when it comes to his debate and his really this is about Elon wanting cheap labor. That's what it's about. He's just turning around and cracking down, just like the previous Twitter regime. And I think that's exposing him, and that it's done a lot of damage to his reputation in the long run.
Now, Benjamin Netanyahu is currently under the surgeon's knife. Unconfirmed reports that he has stage 3 cancer of the prostate. Are Americans in prayer mode over this, or would Netanyahu shuffling off the mortal coil actually solve a problem or two for American politicians?
As an American, I do think that Netanyahu holds a unique place in American and Israeli history. And I did a documentary several years back for RT called Crime or Prime Minister, where I went to Israel and interviewed many high-profile Israeli journalists, Gideon Levy, Chaim Levinson, others, who really described Netanyahu as the pillar that held the Israeli state together through his own corrupt acts. He'd basically made himself the Israeli state. But also that he, because of his unique relationship, having grown up in the United States, he understands the United States, he's been able to manipulate U.S. politics and the relationship in a way that I don't think any other Israeli leader could do so effectively. And so if he were off the stage, and you're going to get some crazier, more radical, more religious Israeli politician likely in power, I think that would do a lot in terms of exposing Israel for what it truly is, but also undermining its special relationship with the United States, which ultimately it's going to take a lot more than Netanyahu's exit from the scene to undermine that, because we're dealing with basically just bought and blackmailed politicians here. But I think there is a consciousness, there's an awakening happening in the United States, that we're now able to talk about these issues in a way that we weren't before because of this horrific war. And so I remain hopeful that the truth and light will prevail. I don't know if 2025 will be the year that it gets better. I'm interested to see the outcome of your poll, whether or not people think it'll be better or worse than 2024. But I have to remain hopeful in the future that, yes, we're only moving in the direction of truth and light, and that would mean one day the U.S. is out of this relationship with the parasite Israeli government.
Amen. Anya Parampil, thanks as always for that tour of the horizon. Anya Parampil, journalist, political commentator, and author of a very fine book, A Corporate Coup, Venezuela and the End of U.S. Empire. Now, let's take a quick break and then take your calls to the hour. Stay tuned.
You have to remember back in 2002, 2003, there was a wish by George Bush for regime change. That's what was driving him. Nothing to do with weapons of mass destruction, which of course didn't exist in Iraq. So they had to construct some sort of formula, some sort of cover story in order to persuade the British public that intervention in Iraq was right. Now, David Kelly, as an expert in weapons of mass destruction, knew that this was untrue. He knew that there were probably no weapons of mass destruction in Iraq.
That was a guy that could have brought down, the whole system.
I reckon you're chaff. You've been thrown up to divert our probing.
The Foreign Affairs Select Committee, that parliamentarian briefing, I think that was an indignity to him.
We saw it on the news, and my very first thought was shock. Oh my God, you know, this man is in the eye of the media hurricane. He should be protected by that at least.
You've got blood on your hands, Prime Minister. Are you going to resign over this?
I don't know the details of how Lord Hutton happened to be selected, but what was certainly the case is that he was the right kind of judge to use from the point of view of Downing Street and the intelligence services as well.
Of the 21 days of hearing, only one half of one day was spent on discussing the forensic aspects. That is disgusting.
We were given the Hutton report the day before it was published, but actually what happened was he went too far.
The events of 2003 were disgraceful ones in this country's history, and it's unfinished business. Those responsible for an illegal war, those responsible for the death of David Kelly, have not been brought to justice. There's been no inquest into David Kelly's death. There needs to be one. We need to make sure that those who behaved in a reprehensible way in 2003 are finally brought to book.
So get voting on the poll. Almost 25,000 people have voted so far. Will 2025 be better or worse than 2024? You can vote on my Telegram channel, t.me/George Galloway, on my X, on the YouTube community poll, or on the YouTube stream. Now, speaking of YouTube, you will have noticed that we have the one and only Scott Ritter on the show as a guest tonight. But remember, he's not allowed on YouTube for reasons which cannot be explained. There is no rhyme or reason to them. But if we put Scott Ritter on the mother of all talk shows, YouTube will remove the show from their platform. They have told us that in writing. So, when Scott Ritter comes on, you'll have to leave YouTube and tune in to the many other platforms on which the show is untrammeled being broadcast. You can go to Rumble, Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, and all the others. You should do so in good time so as not to miss the beginning of the Scott Ritter interview, which I can assure you will be well worth watching. Let's go to Ali in North Carolina, but on Palestine. Ali, what do you want to say?
Hello, George. How are you?
By the grace of God, good. What would you like to say, Ali?
Thank you. So I wanted to say, George, that the being Palestine, Israel, the humanity is dead, morality is dead, politics is dead. We don't even have a single politician who can stand up to Israel. Are we all sold out, including the politicians? That's my question to you, and I'll take my answer offline.
Well, I spoke at some length about this on, I think, a rather good interview I did, a long-form interview with a man called, well, the show's called Mr. Obnoxious. Look it up, and I go into some depths about this. But in short, state capture of Western countries has taken place. Israel has state captured Western countries so that their political class and their media echo chamber, or is it the other way around, or are they entirely symbiotic? It would appear that they are, because not one single Western outlet in any Western country has reported truthfully and fully and honestly on this crisis over the last 15 months. The politicians, virtually all of them, virtually every single one of them, regardless of which party, are 100% behind Israel. Now, you can believe that that's because they love Israel, they love its stolen food, they love its stolen beaches, or you can believe something else. I prefer to believe something else. That state capture has been achieved by means of bribery, blackmail, corruption of all kinds, and highly skilled propaganda efforts by the people who are at this very moment in time trying to interrupt this broadcast, trying to bring to an end this broadcast by their technical assaults, like they did with the Crispin show this morning, which suddenly broke into pornographic films and all kinds of other obscenity. This highly skilled, highly motivated, and presumably well-remunerated effort that is constant, that is 24/7, ready to come down like a ton of bricks on anybody with a dissident voice on the Israel-Palestine question, together with the bribery and the blackmail. That's what the Epstein connection, after all, was all about. They have effectively stolen, captured the polity in Western countries. And I don't know about you, Ali, but I'm not prepared to go quietly into that dungeon. So I'll continue to rage against the dying of the light. Thanks for your call. Comments on YouTube. You can scan the QR code now and leave a comment on the YouTube stream. Jim Passarotri says Trump has become senile just in time to continue the legacy of senile US presidency. Well, I hope not. Aquila McCann says, I hope Anya Parampil is wrong about Trump keeping the funding to Israel. This could only mean the total annihilation of Palestinians. And Jim again says, American GDP is mostly student debt, OnlyFans, and military, of course. And Ian McKillop says H-1B visas are supposed to be for highly educated people needed in the tech industry. So why have 9,000 just been granted to, sorry Ian, I can't read out the rest because I've run out of screen. When the screen moves up, I'll complete. But I don't know about you, but I'm on the edge of my seat trying to work out who these 9,000 have just been granted to Amazon for their warehouse workers. Wow, the US warehouse workers are on strike. So H-1B visas, supposedly for Einsteins, have been given to 9,000 strike-breaking black-leg scabs seeking to break the Amazon strike. Wow. I'd like to say only in America. Once upon a time, I would have said only in America, but I'm afraid it's not only in America now. Ben Johnson says AIPAC openly brags on Twitter about owning every American politician and controlling every election. And Americans are so brainwashed, they think Russia is interfering with the elections. Well, let's go to Canada, where Amy wants to talk about the decline of the West. Go ahead, Amy.
Yes, hi, George. Happy New Year to you and your family and to your whole team, and Happy New Year to the listeners. Thank you for your show, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak. Yes, I wanted to talk about the decline of the West. Like the previous caller said, Gaza is really shows us that everything is collapsing. They have no morals, culturally, and especially the rule of law, because the whole world is we have to follow the law. You know, when a country does something that is bad, we rely on the international courts to restore the order. But we saw that 2023 and 2024, it was the top of the collapse of everything. But something happened this week in Africa, in Niger especially. The last caller said that there's no more leaders that have morals. But the General Tiani in Niger this week, he really exposed the root of evil, like France and the colonial mindset of some countries that always want to, they only know they know is to steal lands, steal resources, it's like they don't have intelligence to grow their own wealth, you know. Tierney said exactly the root of the problem. He said that he clearly exposed how the Western countries are funding terrorists to come into countries that want to be sovereign, that want to work for their population, but they finance terrorists to go and to kill people just to save their own interest. And they do that with the help of, unfortunately, other African leaders who have like short-minded. They don't see the big picture, because if the Niger or countries of the Sahel fall, there will be next. But they don't see the big picture. They think that for the short-term interest, they're going to escape what's going to be next. Like in Syria, they kicked out Bashar al-Assad, but now, what's coming next is going to be worse. So, 2025 is going to be, to me, it's going to be a bad thing, a bad year. But thanks to we still have some leaders who like Putin or the African leaders who see what's going on, and the population in these countries, they also understand what's going on, and they want to stop the slavery that's been going on for thousands of years. So 2025, to me, we have to wake up. People around the world have to wake up, because the leaders, if we let them go like this, we already know that World War III is going to be coming. The only thing that we can do is to, slow it down, but at least we have to fight for what is good. To me, it's going to be really a shame that we already leave Gaza alone like this. At least we have to fight for what is good, because I'm a believer also, to have something in Judgment Day to save ourselves. Because if we go along, if we are accomplices with this, with them.
Amy, thank you for that wonderful call, and in particular for educating us on these African countries that get very little attention in the museum media, but too little attention even from us. And we're going to have to change that. Ghana has just elected a new president, far better than the old. There are big moves in Niger, in Burkina Faso, in Senegal. We really do need to set aside half of a show at least to discuss these with experts. And I was thinking that when you were talking, that we owe that to all the viewers, that they should not be undereducated in this crucial part of Africa, which is a crucial part of the human future. Thanks, Amy, in Canada. Now, the MOATS podcast is doing great guns. We are in the top 10 in Lithuania, in Morocco, in Saudi Arabia, and in Poland this week. How about that? You can download it by scanning the QR code on your screen now. And you can listen to the weekly podcast via the email moats.tv website. Now let's go to Coventry in England, where Rana wants to talk about the Arab world. Go ahead, Rana.
Hi, George. Hello. So I do want to talk about the Arab world, mainly about the latest video you uploaded in which you said the Arab world is dead to me. And I remember watching it, and I felt you might as well just get your hand out of the screen and give me a slap on the face. Because I think I was discussing this take with lots of my Arab friends who followed you for many years, since we were children. I grew up in Iraq, and I knew about you and followed you, and you've championed Arab causes, particularly in British politics and Western politics, for many years. And when we reached this moment when you said the Arab world is dead to me, because you saw very little cooperation, both from Arab leadership and from governments in the Middle East and the Arab world, to bring about peace and stability in Syria and Palestine. So I want to ask you, could you elaborate more on what you mean when you say the Arab world is dead to me? And the second part of my question is, what can we do? I mean, I'm an Arab, I live in Britain, and us normal people who are not in a position of power, not in a position of influence, what can we do to help Palestine, to help Syria? What's in our power to do other than just donate to charities? That's the only thing that I've done in the past year since the Gaza war started that I thought could have impact. But what else can I do?
Well, just before I answer, will you answer this to me? Did you and your friends discuss why I might have reached that conclusion? Was there any introspection involved? Was there any recognition that you can understand why I came to that conclusion? Or was it just me reaching out from the screen, slapping you willy-nilly?
We'd rather try to blame Arab governments more than introspection into ourselves. We thought, we were children when all these conflicts started, so we kind of avoided putting any blame on ourselves. It's very easy to do, but I know that the nature of politics in the Arab world and just the internal conflicts that we have resulted in a situation where we can't unite and we can't support any. We haven't provided any reason for anyone from the West to take up these causes and support us and be on the side of the.
Well, I think that's admirably candid. So let me be candid in return. First of all, you will have not seen any diminution of my output on Palestine. If anything, an increase in my output on Palestine. It was the main part of what I said even this evening, as it was last Wednesday, last Sunday, the Wednesday before that, and so on. So it's not as if I have turned away from the now last remaining Arab cause, at least for the next decade or two, and that is the question of Palestine. And I never said I would leave that alone. I never said that the Palestinians were dead to me. They are a part of the beating heart of me. And any simple survey of my output on social media, on the mother of all talk shows, and so on, will show you that. But there is now no effective Arab national movement anywhere across the Arab world. There are millions of people who believe in it, but they are powerless. All of the political force that is moving now in the Arab world is either the Takfiri extremist fanatics with whom I want nothing to do. I'm sure you understand that. Why would someone like me want to have anything to do with people like that? And the only other visible force that's moving is the Arab regimes, every single one of which now is entirely undeserving of whatever remains of my lifetime in their support. I can't. Let's say I've got 10 more, 15 more good years, if God spares me. What am I going to spend them on? Am I going to spend them on continuing to dive deeply into the politics in Egypt or Syria or Morocco? I've got more pressing things to do with the remaining part of my life, things that will make a difference. I can now make no difference at all to political developments in the Arab world, except on Palestine. And on Palestine, I continue to spend most of my political effort on international issues. But I have other things to do. I have to build a British political party, appealing to British voters on issues that are British in character. I have the events in the Ukraine, the danger of nuclear war the conflict in the South China Sea. So Gayatri and I are about to make a film on the South China Sea and all the troubled waters within it. Well, frankly, that's going to be of more use than me becoming more and more expert in the politics of the Gulf. I want nothing to do with the Arab regimes, and I want nothing to do with the only power that is, if they are, going to contest for power with them. And that's not even a given. They may in fact be hand in hand forever. But if there's going to be a challenge to these Arab regimes, it will come from the ISIS and Al-Qaeda and HTS and the alphabet soup of Islamist extremism. And, you know, I just don't want anything to do with them. I hope you can forgive me for that. Rana, last word to you.
Do you feel that your life has been wasted fighting for all these Arab causes, and every time, although you were on the right side of history, it's never worked out on the side you're fighting on, whether it's the Iraq War, the Syrian War, justice for Palestine?
No, I don't regret doing it. I don't ask for any thanks for having done it, and I don't regret having done it. But there comes a point in your life when you're in an abusive relationship. Look at it that way. That I could go on with endless devotion and energy into who we should be supporting in this Arab country or that, who's good, who's bad in this Arab country or that. But I presently see no point in that. There are many good people in the Arab countries, many, many millions of them, but they are not competing for power. They have no possibility of coming to power. The Arab national cause is dead. The socialist cause in the Arab world died long before, many decades before. But I am a loyal supporter of the idea of Arab national unity from the Atlantic to the Gulf, personified in the person of President Nasser of Egypt, the greatest of all Arab leaders. That politics is now dead. So what am I going to do? I can't throw my lot in with the Takfiri fanatics, and I would never throw my lot in with the Arab dictators, the kings, the emirs, and the rest of them. I hold them in bottomless contempt. So there's nobody for me to relate to in the Arab world. A final last word to you, Rana.
You can always have us to relate to. You have my number on the show, so you can give us a call and relate to us. We're still here.
God bless you all. Thank you, Rana, in Coventry. Now, if you're watching on TikTok, thanks for the likes tonight. 50,000 likes already on the live stream. Make sure you tap the screen to follow and like if you're watching on TikTok. Will is in California on Donald Trump. Will, what would you like to say?
Well, good to talk to you, George. Thank you for taking my call. And I'm a little concerned over here in the States and would like your take on a couple of questions. You know, if Trump was so ignorant on the damage caused by his Operation Warp Speed and other issues, how is he ever going to be able to navigate the devious evil obviously facing him ahead with all of the contrived evil deeds staring down the barrel? Is he too old now? Has he been captured by his handlers? Has he simply accomplished his ego-driven task by simply winning the election? He's neither an outsider nor self-funded anymore, and I don't trust his donors or his inner circle, save for maybe RFK and Kash Patel. Could it be more like Massa, George? make America second again. And we know which country we're talking about.
Yes, well, I mean, I don't know. I don't know Donald Trump. I've not met him. So I can't vouch for whether or not he's as sharp as a tack. And if he is, whether that's sharper or less sharp than Joe Biden was when he was sharp as a tack. Time will tell, no doubt on that. But the last time I saw him on television, he looked perfectly cogent, looked perfectly energized. But I did say right after he won in November that the coming struggle for Donald Trump will be decisive, will be important. Now, you talk about his inner circle, but his inner circle is fighting like ferrets in a sack right now. And I talked to Anya about it over this H-1B visa issue, about which we know far more than we did at the beginning of the show. Steve Bannon and Elon Musk are in a bare knuckle mixed martial arts fight in a cage with only one likely winner, in my opinion. That Bannon is now talking about Musk and Vivek in such terms as to make you wonder whether they'll ever be able to be brought back together again. So there clearly is a struggle going on for Donald Trump. I work on the assumption that his son, Donald Trump Jr., will be the most influential. Maybe I'm old-fashioned. My son's opinions would be highly valued by me, and I think most people would feel the same. But if that's true, then I think that Donald Trump Jr.'s opinions are the best opinions of the Trump circle. So obviously I'm rooting for him. I think that RFK and Tulsi Gabbard, I don't know this Kash Patel, but you've spoken highly of him implicitly. They're obviously better than little Marco Rubio and the guitar-playing bigot that they've sent as the ambassador to Israel, who doesn't believe that there is anything called Palestine or ever has been anything called a Palestinian. That's how bad it is. There are many bad elements, and there are many even worse elements in the Trump inner circle. And it depends which Trump we get. If we get the Trump that was campaigning in Michigan on the last day of the election, if we get that Trump, then things will take a dramatic turn for the better. If we get the Trump that runs around with Mrs. Adelson, the $100 million donor, and the things that he says about Israel-Palestine with her, and the things that he did in his last term as president, moving the embassy to Jerusalem, recognizing the illegal annexation of the Golan Heights, and so on, then you're right, we're in for trouble. What we'll have to do is fight for the best outcome that we can get, Will. Thanks for that. In California, more comments. Moose SF says, what do people think of Jamal Thomas's report that Israel used a tactical nuclear weapon in Syria 2 weeks ago? Well, I'm following the reports with interest. I haven't seen any pictures of what they bombed. Did they just bomb a mountain? In which case, maybe they were testing a mini nuclear device. There are some reports of increased radiation levels as far away as Cyprus, but this is a story that will run and run. Sparky sends $10 to the show. Thank you, Sparky. We badly need it. Shouldn't Erdogan flood Syria with Turkish ground forces before the US figures out how to stop him? It may be Syria's only chance at pulling back from being the next Libya. Once in, the Turks won't leave. Israel may feel double-crossed by Erdogan, but they knew whom they were dealing with. Turkey can annex Israel later. Well, as you donated $10, Sparky, I'll not be as rude about the contribution as I might otherwise have been. Raymond says the Gazan genocide will forever be a stain on the West. I was going to say on the consciences of the West, but clearly the West has no conscience. Ireland is the only country with one. And Maths 2565 says, I just can't see any more suffering of the Palestinians. I cry every time I see it. It hurts so deeply. Sorry, George, I am not strong enough. And Bernard Doyle says, I would imagine Labour regrets going into government with their hands tied to genocide. It must be a baptism of hellish fire to sit in Westminster with such loyalty to genocidal maniacs. Now, the poll is going well. Over 25,000 have voted. Not that many of you think that this coming year is going to be better than the year coming now to an end. On Telegram, 26% say it will be better. On X, 29%. On the YouTube community poll, 27%. And on the YouTube stream, 28%. So a very great level of pessimism about what the next year holds for all of us. Now remember, at 8:45 precisely, because Scott Ritter is our final guest of the evening, if you're watching on YouTube, you'll have to retune to one of the other platforms, either Rumble or Twitter or Facebook or TikTok and so on, because we can't let YouTube pick our guests. I'm sure you understand that, and I hope you sympathize with it. Let's take a quick break. And then it's Yasir in Quebec on the employment visas in the US. It's becoming quite a hot potato, that one. Stay tuned.
You know, and it's a very, thank you for, you know, I'm a big fan of your show, Gigi. Great debate, great. And I'm Scottish. I'm very passionate about what's happening there, you know. I had a great mom. She was Scottish, Mary McLeod. She taught me well. She taught me well at everything, including golf. I love Scotland, and I love the Scottish food. It's great food. I said to Melania, you know, haggis. Look at that. What's more Scottish than that? Me. I am that haggis. She said, what, thin-skinned and full of crap?
You are listening to the mother of all talk shows with George Galloway.
Let's go back to Canada, Quebec, where Yasser wants to talk about the employment visa issue in the US. Go ahead, Yasser.
Bonjour, Monsieur Galloway. First, I wish you and your family, your cohorts, your colleagues, your audience and viewers a very happy, healthy New Year 2025. Second, I want to quickly thank you profusely. I wanted to quickly thank you profusely for giving me the opportunity to contribute to this show almost 10 times. Thank you so much once again. The point I wanted to make in regards to the debate raging right now in the U.S. Related to H-1B, I think it may be a cynical ploy. There might be more to it than meets the eye because first, they are framing it very narrowly on a particular class and category of visa, H-1B. It is, in fact, the debate is about foreign workers or denying Americans the opportunity for employment opportunities for these jobs. If you look at it, if you just broaden the canvas a bit, they'll keep dragging this debate. They'll have some civil war within the party or by the donor class or people who have bought their way into the campaign. But the fundamental issue remains that the House always wins. These titans of tech, the tech barons, will eventually win this because even if Trump or the party in Congress relents and imposes any sort of ceiling or cap on H-1B or J-1 or other employment visas, the issue is the tech titans will still outsource these jobs. because this debate is devoid of any discussion about outsourcing and offshoring. If an H-1B is not issued, but in its place, a job is created in India by virtue of offshoring or outsourcing, then the end result remains the same. In fact, it's advantageous for the tech companies because instead of paying U.S. salaries or U.S. wages, they'll be paying Indian wages and Indian salaries. Likewise, I think if you look at it, companies like TCS, the Tata Consultancy Services, the company that bought Jaguar and Range Rover, that's another dimension that's not being talked about, that what prevents these companies that they have been doing, this trend has been ongoing for at least 15, 20 years, to come grow into the U.S. market by acquisition, by merger, and then simply outsource jobs to India. So it's the large consultancy companies, the big four of accountancy, they already have massive presence in India. They do that already. Indian companies can simply emulate the same practice. And the third part of it, which I quickly want to highlight, is the dreamers. How come this debate does not address the issue of dreamers, kids who were brought to the U.S. by their parents, one or both, at a young age where they did not have adult franchise? They went to American schools, they were educated here, and they're being treated as foreign aliens while the U.S. is importing these foreign workers on H-1B or J-1 or others and sending these people back or giving them temporary reprieve or keeping them on life support, kids that have been schooled all their life in the U.S. And somehow it's not part of this debate that you have workforce in your country, schooled in the U.S., went to universities and colleges in the U.S., are amply qualified, but we are sending them back, we are deporting them while discussing the employment visas. That's what I wanted to say.
Well, look, I mean, first of all, it's entirely a domestic affair for the people of the United States. They are entitled to draw their lines anywhere they want to draw them, to build their walls anywhere they want to build them. This is an American story. The rest of the world have their own borders, have their own immigration regimes, and have their own system of visas and employment permissions and so on. Everyone is entitled to that. That's the very meaning of national sovereignty, is that you control your own borders. If you do not control your own borders, you are not a state at all. So I have a journalistic interest in it only. I don't pretend to care very much about it. It's purely an American affair. But when I see Bannon and Elon Musk slugging it out, I realize there's an issue there that the rest of us better be aware of. Me, I'm still mourning. 134 years ago this day, they buried their hearts at Wounded Knee. The massacre at Wounded Knee. You see, I'm that weirdo that my mother says that she knew I was not going to be like other children because when I was a kid, I was always on the side of the Indians. Not the Indians like Vivek, the Indians like Cochise and Sitting Bull. 134 years ago, the massacre of the Indian remnants at Wounded Knee and the beginning of the end of the genocide which destroyed, literally destroyed, almost 100 million people from the north of Canada to the tip of South America. 100 million indigenous people were destroyed to make way for the people who are there now arguing about immigration. I merely ask them they're entitled to keep out immigrants, bring in immigrants under any H-1A, B, C's or D's they like. But I have a little bit of grace when you spit hatred at immigrants whilst ruling a country which is entirely, in its entirety, an immigrant state. Bill is in Texas. Fair amount of fighting went on there too. Bill in Texas on Russia, Ukraine, and Trump. Go ahead, Bill.
Good evening, George. And yes, the Comanches put up one hell of a fight. But I wonder what you think of the chances of Russia agreeing to the rumor of Trump's proposals of a DMZ similar to Korea, where it's East and West Ukraine with NATO membership in 20 years for all of Ukraine. And I don't think there's going to be much left of Ukraine. But with the DMZ, is it going to end up being just like South Korea? Basically a NATO base. And will they start back up with the bioweapons labs in what's left of the Ukraine?
What a good question, Bill. Well, I can't speak for Russia. I haven't even spoken to anyone from Russia since I left Kazan a month or so ago after the BRICS conference. So I don't know what the current thinking is. But I was in the presence of President Putin and Mr. Lavrov and other Russian leaders in Kazan let's call it a month ago. I can't remember how many weeks ago it was now. And the impression I formed at that time was that there is no possibility whatsoever that Russia will agree to a freezing of the conflict along the DMZ lines that ended the conflict in Korea. And one of the reasons is the conflict in Korea never ended. And South Korea became, as you rightly say, merely a NATO camp from which the possibility exists of a NATO attack on both Russia and China. So they will never agree to that. They'll never agree to it because of the recent experience in Syria, where the leaving of a frozen conflict in Idlib, where a nest of Al-Qaeda and ISIS armies that could have been defeated and removed, but were allowed to retreat there and effectively practice an embryonic state power there, putting their caliphate ideas into practice there. And look what happened next. If you have a frozen conflict, it will, at some point in the future, erupt and become red hot again. So for all these reasons, I feel sure that Russia will never accept a bifurcation of Ukraine, whereby the east of Ukraine remains part of Novorus, New Russia, but the west part of Ukraine becomes part of NATO. I think that's a complete non-starter and would negate really the whole purpose of this special military operation in the first place. It would merely have pushed the problem a few hundred kilometers away. Secondly, I don't believe that Russia will agree to cease the conflict until it has liberated Odessa, the quintessentially Russian city on the sea, and linked up with Transnistria, where hundreds of thousands of Russian people live in a kind of netherworld, trapped between NATO aspirant Moldova and the Ukrainian regime, the ultra-nationalist regime of Zelensky. They will not abandon the Transnistrian Russian population. And bear in mind, there are many Russian peacekeeper forces, by agreement, in Transnistria. They're not going to leave them up the creek without a paddle. So I believe that any redivision of the boundaries of Ukraine will leave the remaining Ukraine landlocked. It will not have access to the sea, and Odessa will be the capital of the new Russia, the Novorus, in the former eastern Ukrainian territories. Thirdly, they will not talk with Zelensky, and Zelensky will not have an election so that the Ukrainian people could boot him out, as they certainly would do, which is why they're not having an election. So if Russia will not negotiate with Zelensky, and Zelensky will not leave or be forced to leave, then the matter will continue to be resolved on the battlefield, where it is all going one way, and that's Russia's way. Thanks, Bill, for the opportunity to talk about that. Now, I remind you, we've got Scott Ritter on the show tonight, but remember, he's not allowed on YouTube. So just before his interview begins, in about 20 minutes from now, you need to, in good time, don't miss the interview, retune to one of the other platforms that we are broadcasting on: Rumble, Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, etc. Comments. Antonio Cristoforu says, how long before Lamy blames Putin for Netanyahu's cancer? And David Greenwood says, Wes Streeting is a rat in human form. And Monkey Boy says, but George, Jimmy and Donut Dada have rebranded the head choppers. They're now friendly fellows, don't you know? Tying their ties in a Windsor knot, I noted suspiciously. Migo da Casa says, Anya Parampil and Scott Ritter, does it get better? And let's go to Oxfordshire in England, where Amel wants to talk about Syria, Palestine, and Lebanon. Amel, what would you like to say?
Good evening.
Good evening, ma'am.
Mr. Galloway,
Go ahead.
George, I'm not going to wish anyone for Happy New Year. I'm not going to wish anyone for happiness in this earth, because my earth is not happy. My mother-in-law, who is 86 years this year, she's homeless. But she had a nice, beautiful house where we used to go in the holiday. When I opened our balcony, I could see my valley on top of the mountain of Lebanon. The only people who I'm wishing resist and exist is the people of Palestine, especially the Gaza, and the people of South Lebanon. They are the one who I'm wishing happiness. And the rest of the planet, I'm not wishing for no one happiness and happy holiday or happy this. Secondly, George, I had a great teacher, Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah. And I have a great professor, and that's Imam Ali. George, you say that you live in the Arab world. We've been taught by the birth. Your circle will go smaller and smaller. Those who will stand with you will go smaller and smaller. George, standing with us, or speaking for us, or wanting well for us, you achieve greatness. I marched with you in 2003. I didn't know you. I came that new to the country. I find it really that you are great, and I agree with you everything, George. And I'm going to agree with you also your decision, because now is the time. What we was listening 2013, when Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah was telling us what is coming to us. We've been not warned yesterday. We've been warned for a long time. And we will remain. Yarhamuna wa nabqa, wal ardu lana sanabqa. George, we will remain. We are facing dark. Everyone left us. We are alone. We are alone. But there is no day like the day of Hussein ibn Ali. How can I compare my day with that day, George? How can I compare it The loss, what I lost, Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah, the loss of Imam Hussein, George. I know.
Well, these are extremely powerful words and emotions that will be long remembered by those who heard them. And no one can gainsay them. The Arabs are potentially great people, 350 million people with one language. Compare that to the European Union, for example, a Babel of languages in the European Union. You could have had an Arab Union, a union of Arab states where everybody spoke the same language, where everybody believed in the same God, and where God was a thing in normal everyday life. The spiritual power, the power of the language, containing the lands where Jesus walked, where the Prophet Muhammad walked and spoke, all this land, all this water, all this gas, all this oil, all this culture could have been a contender, could have been great. But the propensity of, now I know that there are people, you may be one of them, who like to blame it all on Johnny Foreigner. If it wasn't for the Israelis, if it wasn't for the British, if it wasn't for the French or for the Americans, we would all be together. And to be sure, all of those played and are still playing a big, big role in keeping the Arabs divided and weak, the better to rob their things. For sure, that's the case. But it is also true that there is no people I have ever met anywhere who can be more easily divided, more easily diverted, more easily confused into fighting for fake countries, fake flags, or turning on their neighbor because their neighbor prays like this rather than like this. I know. I've spent 50 years amongst all that, including in Lebanon, where 15 years ago nearly, I lectured on Kalimahara. I lectured a young blonde woman who was doing all the things I've just described, blaming everybody but the Arabs themselves. Until the Arabs can bury their hatred of other Arabs because of religious or schismatic differences, they will never succeed. Never succeed in liberating Palestine, never succeed in uniting themselves, never succeed in lifting themselves out of the morass of disgrace in which the Arab world is today pitched. And so I will never leave you, Amel. My heart will always be with you. My voice will always be with you. But I can't go on making you the number one in my life. There comes a point at which you have to say, I don't have unlimited time left, and I have many other duties. And if the Arabs won't unite themselves, for how long am I going to talk myself hoarse, trying to persuade them? Now I know there are people who took my resignation the wrong way. I don't think you are among them. Since I resigned, I've never stopped talking about Palestine. I've never stopped talking about Gaza. I've never stopped campaigning for Palestine. And I will do so with all of my breath. But I'm no longer interested in who the Prime Minister of Iraq or Algeria is. That's all I'm saying. Thanks, Amel. Poll update, 27,472 people have voted, but the result hasn't changed. It is an average of 72% of you who think that 2025 is going to be even worse than 2024. Imagine! I'll be right back with Gayatri for the social media roundup. Stay tuned.
We interrupt this program to bring you a special announcement. A big thank you to all our wonderful listeners, as the Mother of All Talk Shows podcast is now one of the most listened to political podcasts in the entire world. We are the #1 English-speaking political podcast in the Middle East, and in the last year alone have charted in the top 10 in podcast land in Pakistan, Russia, and China. Like, rate, and subscribe to the MOATS podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to your podcasts to be a part of the fastest rising independent news show in the world. You are listening to the Mother of All Talk Shows with George Galloway.
We've got the great Scott Ritter coming up, but remember, he's not allowed on YouTube, so you have to switch over to one of our other platforms just before his interview starts. If you're watching on YouTube at all, of course, that is. You can watch us on Rumble, on Facebook, on Twitter, on TikTok, and Uncle Tom Cobley and all. Let's talk to Dennis in New York on history. I'm always up for that. Dennis, what would you like to say?
Good afternoon. Thanks again for having me, George, and all the best to you and your listeners for the new year.
Thank you, sir.
I, like most other people that I know and I'm aware of, including, I think, yourself, it's fair to say, and Scott Ritter and all the other more prominent commentators, were blindsided, angered, devastated, confused, and certainly unprepared for the collapse of Syria and the Assad regime. And so I am struggling to try and figure out how we could have all been so far off the mark and so completely taken unprepared by this. And what I have decided is that what I am missing, and I think maybe what we are all missing, is the historical perspective that we need to be able to understand these developments more clearly. I think the easiest way for me to explain this is to just say something about Vladimir Putin. There's a new book that's about to come out titled The Quran and Russia's Destiny. And it's not published yet, but it will be published soon. It was written by an Islamic cleric from Malaysia, whose name I can't pronounce. It was written at the behest of Sergei Lavrov with a foreword by Alexander Dugin. Again, The Quran and Russia's Destiny. And the reason I bring it up is because this cleric makes a reference specifically to the significance of the Grand Cathedral in Istanbul, the Hagia Sophia, which has now been converted, which Erdogan converted back into a mosque in 2020. So I'm focused on this because I think this is an anchor where I can begin the process of trying to develop the historical perspective that I need to understand really what's going on The battles that are being fought in the Middle East, in West Asia, are thousands of years old. Erdogan had a rally recently where his followers were encouraging him to go to Jerusalem, in their words, and he said, be patient. So Erdogan now controls the Hagia Sophia Mosque. He now controls the Grand Mosque in Damascus, which is among the most significant in all of Islam, and has designs on Jerusalem. So I think we need to consider these historical things, and also, most importantly, how devout and orthodox Vladimir Putin is, and how much of an influence the Orthodox faith is to Russia today as the glue and the motivation that organizes all of these events, in Russia in particular. So I want to know.
I think Dennis's battery may have run out. It was a fascinating taster, and we'll all be making note of that book, and maybe Dennis will come back on Wednesday. We've got a live show on New Year's night, by the way. I mean proper live on Sunday, on Wednesday. What is today? It's Sunday today. So New Year, January 1, Wednesday night. You might have thought that I could not gather all my crew on New Year's night for a live show, but I have, and we will be as live can possibly be on 7 o'clock on New Year's night. And we'll all be able to wish each other a Happy New Year. There'll be one or two festive frills to the show. Thanks, Dennis, for a fascinating introduction to Gayatri, live in the studio with the social media roundup. What's happening, Gayatri?
Well, some interesting and very emotive calls tonight. I was very fascinated by the one on Africa, because I too have been reading into Africa, not least because of the new president in Ghana, but obviously the whole Sahel has been some very interesting developments, and especially as we have been focused so much on Asia, but not much concrete has come out of Asia, because we're commonly very
quiet. We've been talking about a MOATS Asia. Maybe we should have been talking about a MOATS Africa.
Well,
wouldn't it be great if we could have one or other or both? But that depends on people coming in to support.
Anyway, I think we'll definitely put much more attention to Africa in 2025.
We're making a turn to Africa.
Yes, it's going to be promising for 2025 in Africa, I think. And Rana was very emotional as well. She's from Coventry, by the way, and the Workers' Party is very active there. We've got Comrade Paul Batson. Please get in touch with us, because you've got lots of friends there
Rana,
that you can meet up with. Obviously, the one now from Amel, very interesting. Now, will 2025 be better or worse than 2024? Just before we look into the actual comments, I picked up one from last year when we asked a similar question. And Eljas then said, good program. I would just like to add that 2024 will be a year to remember. The law of Rekotel has reached a stage where results are coming out quickly. Mankind is coming together, and hopefully hands of the evil ones will be stopped.
On that subject, or adjacent to it, just a week or two ago, the news was full of orbs and flying saucers and drones and unidentified aircraft that were appearing everywhere. And then it disappeared just like that.
Well, instead of that, it has been aircrafts crashing. Have you noticed how many aircraft
airplanes have crashed
and
in the last few days?
Some unharmed.
Stunning.
But the one in South Korea was...
Presumably everyone died in that.
177 out of 181, according to the latest records. But obviously the South Koreans are very, very...
So the flying saucers disappeared, the plane crashes began. What should we make of that?
Well, Gordon Lemon says, this question, it kind of reminds me of the old saying, smile, it could be worse. And so I smiled, and sure enough, it got worse. Mr. Mark Smith says, each and every year leading up to AD 2030 will get progressively worse and worse, culminating in a total reset known as Agenda 2030, which will make George Orwell's 1984 resemble a Sunday school picnic. So buckle up, it's going to be a bumpy ride indeed. And MH60 says, when one listens to the rhetoric, it is hard not to be pessimistic. From the usual suspect and the new suspects to be. And this is an interesting one because obviously we all know the usual suspects, so we all know, but the new suspects that have come up in recent weeks and months that will make a greater stage in the new year is interesting too. I mean, people had hinted on the Greater Israel Project, but they've been actually portraying maps of the Greater Turkey, reviving the Ottoman Empire on Turkish TV and stuff. So, new suspects indeed. Very interesting. So,
who would one choose to live under? The Greater Turkey or the Greater Israel? What a choice.
Well, as you said earlier in your replies, Palestine remains our steadfast and main focus. And I just want to give a positive note to this last MOATS of 2024. Media Benjamin, our friend from Code Pink, she says, as we look towards the challenges for pro-Palestine activism in 2025, we recognize the forces in the US against us, from Trump to Congress to pro-Israel lobby groups. But the tide is turning. More Americans want to stop sending weapons to Israel, and more countries are sanctioning Israel, and more, I should say. In 2025, we must be resolute as the Palestinian people. Long live Palestine.
I mean, well, that's kind of what Anya also said. Yeah. I mean, it's not unalloyed darkness by any means. No. The pro-Palestine forces around the world have never been stronger. They are down in the area, in the region, where the problems have taken a turn for the worse. Shall we go to Scott Ritter?
Let's go to Scott Ritter. I think our audience is keen to hear what he has to say.
Well, this is the mother of all talk shows. Scott Ritter is a former Marine Corps intelligence officer, weapons inspector. But we're going to have to terminate the YouTube stream now. You need to retune to Rumble, TikTok, Twitter, X, Instagram, or Facebook to continue watching the show, because Scott is banned from our YouTube channel. So for all of you watching on YouTube, it's good night, and see you elsewhere in just a second or two, I hope.